friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to our channel. I'm Felicia Waugh, and today we are going to bake a ton of stuff, can some tomato basil soup. Got lots that I'm doing. My husband is away hunting. If you're just tuning into my channel, thank you so much for joining. My husband and I have 2 children, and we live in Washington in the Pacific Northwest. And we have an 1880 farmhouse that we've been fixing up. We live on 8 acres. We have chickens and horses and a garden. And we love serving the Lord. We live 2 minutes from our church down the road. So here I am chopping up some onions for the tomato basil soup. I let the food processor do the work for me this time. These are super strong onions that I got from Azure Standard in a giant bag, and they're huge onions. So that made quick work of that. So my husband is away duck hunting, and my in-laws have the kids, which is the only way that I can get all of this done that you're going to see me working on. When you have little ones, it can be quite challenging. So now I'm just putting in the olive oil and spreading it around my big stock pot. I'm gonna saute the onions for, I think, 8 minutes. And now I'm just getting all my jars out. I have not done that much canning this year. I've mostly just been putting a lot of it in the freezer. For those that don't know or haven't heard, surprise, I'm pregnant again. So we are expecting our third at the end of March. And I've just been really tired trying to keep up with both of the kids and all of the demands of life and growing another human. So this is like one of the few big canning projects. I've done some apple butter, a little bit of zucchini relish, and I decided I needed some more coffee before continuing. I got started pretty early, like about 7, I think. And this year, it was so much faster because I put all of the frozen tomatoes in the oven at 375, I think it was, and roasted them, and then put them in the blender, and then ran it through the food mill. Last year, I had 2 of my gal friends from church help me, and we ran them under hot water to get the skins off, and it took forever doing it that way. So I was so happy that I put the machines to work and sped things up a lot. So these are early girls, and I get these from a local nursery, Rainier View Nursery in Graham. Their starts are actually from Oregon. I don't remember the name of the farm that they get them from, but they're absolutely phenomenal. For our short growing season, it's fantastic because they are already super far along when you get them, which is what you need if you're going to grow tomatoes in Washington. This recipe calls for 24 pounds of tomatoes, and I pick my tomatoes from the vine immediately once they start blushing. So as soon as they show any orange, I pick them and let them finish ripening in a sunny spot in the house. Now you can see here, I was debating trying to run this through a sieve, but that was not going to work. So I quickly realized that I was going to need to get the food mill. Yeah, that would have taken forever. to strain it through there. So anyways, I pick them immediately. That way the plant can have more energy to ripen other tomatoes and we can get more of a harvest. And then I just stick them in, I rinse them and take the little stem off and put them in the freezer. And then I can make this tomato basil soup. I made 14 quarts last year, as well as maybe 14 pints, and we ate it all. Here I'm just straining the chicken broth. So this is going to be pressure canned because it has chicken broth and because of the amount of onions and other stuff that it has. It does have to be pressure canned for 60 minutes. And I've been wanting to get the pressure canner that has 2 rows so that you can do 14 quarts at a time, because, you know, to heat the pressure canner up and then another 60 minutes, and then it takes so long to cool and set and rest and everything. It takes quite a while. Last year when I did this, because the whole just making the soup process took so long, I think I was working on it from like 6 in the morning to 9 at night. Like, it's a big labor of love, but it is really good soup. And that's another thing that I will say is that I have learned the hard way to always taste multiple times and adjust. You'll see later on that I decided to add an extra tablespoon of salt. And I did add the tomato paste that is optional. I think it's good to add it because it was a little bit thin. I didn't get to say this when I was showing the canning cabinet that I was getting all my jars ready, but I was looking at them really closely and checking that there were no cracks or chips in the lid and that they were nice and clean, and just giving them a good like once over, because I have actually had jars completely shatter in the pressure canner. This house, you know, it was a blessing that it came with a ton of old jars, but at the same time, some of them I didn't realize like that I needed to look so closely for those cracks and chips and things. And that was a real bummer to have, you know, 1 or 2 jars of soup completely go to waste. And then just the mess of it. Now I'm getting the garlic ready. Now this has also been a big learning curve, because the first year I just tossed the garlic into the soup, and I think I ran it through the food processor, and it did not chop the garlic up enough, so there was like big chunks. So now I always run it through a garlic press. And then I was getting the basil ready and chopped that up. I had bought 2 basil plants for $5 each at the grocery store because my basil did not grow this year. And that still wasn't quite enough. It calls for 3 cups of packed basil. So I ran out to the garden to see if I could forage anything at all, if anything was salvageable. We've had a really abundant harvest of a lot of things this year. It's been great. The Lord is blessed. But basil was not one of them. For whatever reason, it was not happy this year. And it's already middle of October, so I don't really expect it to be doing well at this point. That's why I like to freeze the tomatoes and then do this in the fall so that it's cooler weather, because I don't enjoy canning in the hot summer. And now I'm just getting all the air bubbles out. This is another important step that I didn't used to do, that I learned that I really should. Also, just making sure to wipe the rims really good. I like to sterilize my jars in the oven. I just do like 275 for 15 minutes before pouring the soup in. So I feel like every year I get a little bit more efficient, a little bit better. This is not something that I learned really from my mom or my grandma or my great-grandma. My great-grandma canned, and my grandma might have a little bit, mostly just like jams. So I'm just kind of teaching myself as I go and learning from influencers and people on YouTube and cookbooks. So I'm going to pick some rosemary because I'm going to make a couple of no-knead stretch and fold. I'm trying to show you my bubbly sourdough, but you can't really see in the angle, so there it is. It's nice and happy, ready to be used. So I use 50% regular flour, all-purpose flour, and then 50% hard white wheat that I freshly mill, and I get that in bulk from Azure Standard. And then I just add the rosemary. This is Farmhouse on Boone's beginner sourdough bread recipe, and I've been making sourdough for over a year now, so I'm not really a beginner anymore, but I just really like this recipe. I like that I don't have to get out the scale and measure in grams. I like to just dump cups of flour and whatever, flour, water, salt, sourdough, easy. And I'm making a double batch because I'm going to a recipe night. My friend from church does that once a month where we all make new recipes and bring them to share. And I'm going to make my dad's stuffing, and I want to use homemade bread. So I'm super excited to make that. It's very delicious. And I'm going to have fresh celery from the garden to use in it, so that'll make it even better. So while I finish making this bread, I'll just talk to you a little bit, almost like a mini devotion, about the Proverbs 31 woman. We all, if you're Christian, if you watch other YouTubers, we've probably heard about this passage of scripture before, but one thing someone said recently that I thought was just really thought-provoking was about how she had maidservants and how it's okay to have hired help, but that a lot of us probably don't. In our household, we do have a cleaner that comes either like once a month or once a quarter, just depending on the season that we're in. And then I have a babysitter that comes maybe twice a month, every other week or so. So that's super helpful. But then one thing that she said is that compared to their day, we almost do have, or I think this was a comment that someone actually made, it's almost like we have servants because of all the modern conveniences that we have. And later on, I I did like a few loads of laundry. I started the dishwasher. I had the mixer going. I used the blender. I used the food processor, all these modern conveniences, hot water in our plumbing. It's such a blessing. And the Proverbs 31 woman didn't have that. So while I do feel disadvantaged at sometimes because, I don't have a team of people working for me like she maybe did, but I do have a lot of things to my advantage that she didn't have in her day and age. So just counting my blessings in that way, and just wanted to encourage you, the Proverbs 31 woman she sets the bar really high, and God's grace is sufficient for our lack, and in our weakness his strength is made perfect. A lot of the times I read that passage and I just feel like, gosh, I will never measure up. Like, I don't sew, I don't do half the stuff, like I haven't bought a vineyard, I just don't feel like I can accomplish all that this woman is doing. But she was also extremely wealthy, she was a queen, and so just keeping all of that into perspective. And I just like to embody as much as I can of her qualities and her character, especially working on having the law of kindness in my tongue and opening my mouth with wisdom, fearing the Lord. Those are all things that anyone can do, no matter, your financial status or like position in life. You can practice that self-control, and it's so hard when you have little ones that are demanding your attention and you have such a long to-do list. On this day that you're seeing me do all of this, I didn't have my kids with me, so it was easier, but I still barely scratched the surface in what I would have liked to accomplish because I needed to sit down and take breaks because I'm growing another human. And because, God gave us so many hours in a day and he wants us to rest after that, and we all need that. And so just like trying to keep priorities in check, and I do like to work diligently with my hands like she does, and I'm grateful that my husband trusts in me, that he leaves so many details of the house up to me and doesn't worry about it. And so there's a lot that I can embody that she does. I like to provide food for my household and just, not slack off, not be lazy, and just provide for them as much as I can. But also knowing that I'm only human and I also need to take breaks and rest, and that just doing the day-to-day regular tasks of keeping, a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old taken care of is very demanding. Making food all the time, picking up the messes, cleaning them, all that. And then here I'm just feeding the starter again. So there's my little sermon for you. And now I am just getting the first round of soup out of the pressure canner, and I am happy to tell you that I had 100% success rate with all of my seals. It was 1 quart short, so I got 13 quarts instead of 14, but I'm very, very happy that there were no mishaps. And now I'm picking some more tomatoes. Yeah, we're still picking tomatoes. It's great. I don't know if I'm going to make more soup or make some tomato sauce or maybe some salsa. And that one was bad, so I'm just chucking it over to the compost pile. And we also have a lot of green beans. If you have a tip or a variety of green beans maybe that don't get stringy, I have not been able to pick my green beans fast enough before they get giant and stringy. It's such a struggle. So if you have any tips on green bean varieties, or just like how in the world do you get out there and pick them before they're massive and stringy? More time, I guess. More helpers when the kids get older. That'll be great. They love playing in the garden, and it's so sweet to watch them play in the dirt and pick tomatoes and just munch on them in the garden. It's really fun. And here's what I got. We surprisingly had 3 little cucumbers out there. Now I'm gonna do the second stretch and fold on the bread, and this is probably going to be the worst stretch and fold you've ever seen. My bowl, this is the heaviest bowl I have, and it still just slides around everywhere. There I'm showing you one of the air bubbles. So one thing that I learned with sourdough is that you want to be really careful and gentle when you're stretching, folding it, so that you don't pop those bubbles, because that's what gives it the big, beautiful airiness. And there you can see I tore it a little bit, and that's not good. But the thing about sourdough is that it's super forgiving, and like, you don't have to do everything perfect for it to turn out good and still taste good. So that's great. Pat it like a baby. My little bread baby. I actually only did 3 stretch and folds. There's all my beautiful jars of soup. So yummy. And I also made some applesauce oatmeal bread that doesn't look very impressive, but was delicious. All right, so now we're going to do a little farm chore. I needed to deworm the horses. We had been putting this off for a week or 2, and I'm just taping her. So I'm measuring her basically, and it gives you an estimate of the weight. That way I know how much dosage. She was really good and patient, thankfully, because I kept checking over and over and over, because they both weighed like 1,100 pounds. And I thought last time I weighed them, they were like 900, maybe 1,000. I'm like, how are you so fat? And she's like, excuse you, how rude. Don't call me fat. This is Stella. She's our mare. She's a sorrel paint quarter horse, and she is very moody. But I was glad that she stood nice and still for me and was very patient as I checked over and over and over. And I'm like, am I doing this right? Are you really 1,100 pounds? And she's just happy and licking her lips. Whenever a horse licks their lips, it's a sign of submission. Just kind of like, I'm relaxed. We have actually ridden them a few times this spring and summer, so I'm really happy about that we got back in the saddle at least a little bit. Not as much as we would have liked, but we're getting there, and it's just not really the right season to be trying and riding all the time when our horses are not very beginner horses. Not that I need them to be, because I've been riding since I was like 4. I don't consider myself a beginner. I'd say that I'm experienced, but when you're pregnant, you don't want a horse that bucks. You don't want a horse that spooks easily. It's not really ideal. And Stella has bucked many times, so I'm not riding her. Hondo has no buck at all. He's very safe in that regard, but he does spook really easily, and you never know what might scare him. So I just have to be kind of on guard the whole time I'm riding, which makes it not as enjoyable. And they were very happy with their treats. Now I'm gonna give them some hay. It was actually really nice to take care of the horses. I don't go out and do it much. My husband pretty much always throws hay. So it was a good change of pace to get out there and give them some pets and take care of them a little bit. And they sure are beautiful. Here I'm just taking down some calendula flowers that I dry out for my friend's son who has eczema, and then also some lavender and yarrow and clover that I'm making into a tea for my grandma. The yarrow is supposed to stop bleeding, so I thought if she had it as a tea, she struggles with internal bleeding, so I thought that might help maybe a little bit. So I'm just gonna get that all cleaned up and put away, and my cat is having fun being entertained and watching me. That's Maybell. And now I'm just showing the tail end of me mixing up some Pullman bread, and that's the square sandwich bread. And now I'm just gonna load up some stuff to take to the thrift store. I love thrift shopping, and we have a great one near us. So that was really fun to do while the kids were away. I also made some pumpkin cinnamon rolls that were super delicious. And just getting that all rolled out. A little bit too much flour there. And I didn't realize I did, but then I forgot that I should have set the butter, because it was like a pumpkin whipped butter. I should have set that out and let it soften up a little bit before I rolled this dough out. So you'll see in a little bit here how that turned out. It did not spread very well at all, but they still turned out totally fine. So it's just kind of in big clumps. Whoops. Because I had made it ahead of time and put it in the fridge. And now I'm just going to get those cut up and put into the pan and let them sit in the fridge overnight. And then I also didn't realize that they were supposed to rise for an hour before baking them. It turned out fine. I just ended up baking them longer. And we were all eagerly watching the oven, like, are they done yet? Are they done yet? And I did a brown butter frosting. They're absolutely delicious. And here are those artisan loaves. So thank you so much for tuning in to my channel. And I hope you'll come back and check out what we have going on around the farmhouse.